Hello everyone, I hope you're doing uncommonly well. Welcome to Homemakers Radio. It's designed to listen while you go and do something that you dread or something that's a bit tedious or repetitive, maybe even monotonous. And before you go today and go about your business, I would like to share with you my teacup. Today it is, I don't know exactly how to pronounce this, but it's Redoubt Roses. And it's a famous painting by someone named Redoubt. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name, but I also happen to have another dish that goes with, and it's by someone named Roy Kirkham, China, a company that makes it. Roy Kirkham, don't know if you've ever heard of this. And so I want to be sure that you are dressed and ready to go and get your hair done and look like you're going to be doing something important and raise up that level of importance in the home and the dignity and the elegance of the home. Raise it up to elegance, because you may reach a point in your life where there is nothing better. There is nowhere to go. And now we are experiencing some very inclement weather that is not pleasant to be in, unless you're very adventurous and you want to stealth camp in it or stealth walk in it. And you know how I am so interested in the stealth camping. I find it adventurous watching someone else do something that I will never do. And I thought about getting out one of my more sturdy umbrellas and just walking as far as the mailbox and back in this crazy windy weather. It's very noisy windy, and it rattles the windows, and it got me up quite early today. But instead of being upset about it, I just walked through the house and observed what it looked like at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then I got some ideas about what I would tell you when I came here today. So I hope that you will go and get yourself ready, get yourself dressed. This is also important because the home is now going to be increasingly important. The most beautiful and wonderful place that you can be, because many people will not be going on their holidays or traveling. You can do a lot of things at home, and at least if you're stuck there, make it the nicest place you can possibly have, and create an atmosphere for yourself where you will be happy. You will find that there are many things going on in the home that made people what they were, helped them develop their talents, and they built their health. And I've been looking through some of these older Victoria magazines, and I found this one from January 96. That's not all that old, because I began in 88. And I was thinking as I was reading through it, how many things that were in here, how many subjects were in here, were developed from the home, because it talked about an author, it talked about a speaker, it talked about someone who collected herbs, it was talked about a painter. All these things went on in people's homes, and they were people of the times, like the 1990s. And there was someone else that was into herbology and learning to make herbs for the bathroom and for the bath, and they had little watercolor drawings in there. Those are things we do at home. And it also talked about developing a picture album. Well, that's something you would do from the home. Most of the things that people do now on YouTube and other places, after they've lost their jobs or after they've had to look for something else to do, are things that they do at home. And it's quite fascinating to see that things come from home. I know years ago we were told or indoctrinated to believe that the home was, you would collect ideas from the world for the home, but actually it's the opposite. And even your manners flow forth from the home to the courtesy to other people. That's where it comes from. I know we've been told you will develop your rules and your rules to live by from out there, but it's not exactly true. And I just recently read about a lady who had written a book back in the she wrote a book about fruitcake and the history of fruitcake. I can't exactly find it. I'll try to write it down in there in the description at the post. If you're new here, please go to the link and then go to the post where I will be embedding this video for you. Now this is to work by. It reminds me of the radio of the 1950s. We used to turn that on when we were doing our dishes or our laundry, and it just kind of helped us through the day. And so today I'm just going to pretend this is a radio program and you can watch, you can listen. There's nothing here to see. But the fruitcake that I was so interested in, that this woman wrote about, she had one recipe for applesauce fruitcake, and all it was you make a quick bread and you add applesauce and toasted walnuts. So I might try that today. And when you're at home, and I'm broadcasting these for my grandchildren, and so then I'm just sharing them with the world too, if you are interested in it. And sometimes I will tell them something that will help them along. And today I am focusing on the fact that so many of them now are working at home online and want to know how to make the days different, because one day just kind of flows into the other and it just seems all the same. So I have made a list of how you could make every day different. And as a homemaker, this was one of the things that we were concerned about in the 1950s, to make each day different. Otherwise it would seem so much the same. Do you remember, and you could probably see these online or in antique stores, if we're still allowed to go in them, the dish towels of the days of the week. Like Monday was baking day, and Tuesday was a cleaning day, and Wednesday was a shopping day, and it was all be embroidered very carefully on these dish towels, on these soft cotton towels that you would use to dry your glassware or your silverware. And that was important to women. They also kept little journals, and they would have a visiting day, because if you didn't, then your mind could not be as settled, and you'd be all mixed up with what you were going to do. And one of the things that happened in the modern era after the 50s was you could do everything every day, all day. You had an automatic washer and a dryer, and it wasn't so much trouble to do laundry, so you just did it every day. You sweep every day, you would bake every day. Everything was convenient, everything was fast. But one thing that we're finding is it's really important to have different things on different days, just so that one day doesn't flow into the other, where we don't have any distinction. And this is one of the reasons why I have spoken about having a journal and writing down what you wore, what the weather was like, what you heard, what you saw, what you ate, because it would help you to recall something that happened. Very often our grandmother would refer to her diary or journal to try to remember when she last spoke to someone or when she last bought something. And so it would be in there. She'd know how long she had something or where she ordered something from. She would just refer to her journal. And so today I just want to make a list, and perhaps you could do better, but maybe you could start your own little broadcast. So let me just begin with, and I'm really talking to the young men in my family that are working at home, and that is to wear a different shirt every day and have a color for Monday and a color for Tuesday. Now, here in the U.S., everybody's just crazy about plaid. There's so much plaid. You can get any kind of plaid in the whole world. And at church here in the little area we live, in the winter, all the men at church wear plaid. And the ones that stand up to do the prayers and the singing and the Lord's Supper, they've all got plaid shirts on all winter. And in the summer, they wear the tropical shirts, tropical printed shirts. And I haven't seen a tie and a coat in decades out here. It's probably different in the East. It's generally known that it's pretty informal out here in Oregon. And we traveled up here from Texas and found it to be very, very much informal. But so a different color, if you're wearing plaid shirt and you're informal, you can wear a different color plaid shirt every day. And I would just say button-down shirt just makes you a little more formal, feel a little more formal, like you're doing a real job. That's why I tell women at home, dress up a little bit and wear a different color every day. Wear a different something every day. And you can always wear an apron over it to protect it. I have been digging deeper into my closet, going through things, and not willing to let it just hang there because it goes out of style after a while. As a matter of fact, I've got a number of these beautiful wool jackets that were not expensive at the time, but bought back in the 80s or 90s, and they had the shoulder pads in them, and so they went out of style, and I never wore them again, but I can wear them here at home, and they keep me warm and feeling kind of formal. And what I'll do is sometimes get out one of these old Victoria magazines that had those styles in them and use that. That's another thing, is to get out a magazine for the day, one that you have saved. And I get out all of January's magazines that I have saved, and I only saved the really good ones or the ones that had the crafts in them that I wanted. They don't necessarily have to be a Victoria magazine, but they can be some other thing that I saved. And I've got them all categorized according to the month. And so I'll get those out, and there are now enough for one a day on that month. So I have 30 January magazines because I kept so many of them through subscriptions. And so that's, or a book, can have a book a day. And so start out with your plaid shirt of the day. I'm talking to the young men or young women at home that are working from home. A different shirt every day, a different book or magazine every day. If you have a different book, keep a bookmark in it and read a different chapter every day. If you're interested in history, or you're interested in geography, or you're interested in flying. I don't know why young men want to fly these days, but they're all interested in small aircraft and they want to fly. I prefer to see my country from the ground level, trying to talk them into getting more interested in trains or creating their own transportation style from the ground. And so now let's move on to a different type of breathing exercise, maybe, or a stroll around the house or around the grounds outside, to make sure that you have your 2 or 3 minute stroll and going out and breathing fresh air. And I'm going to be reading from the Jane Austen Diet, the section on the breathing and the air, which I found very fascinating. And so how about a different food every day? Just a different preparation of food. And I know that there are many people interested in different nationalities and different food, different ethnic type of food. Try that. So that Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday each have its own distinct flavor. The other thing would be to make sure you have a journal entry. Another one would be have communication with someone every day, even if it's very short. Send a card, a letter, a text. And do one job every day that is not your online job. Go through a box of papers, take care of your room, and the other one would be sketch something every day. That's what those journals are so great for. You can do so much in them. You can record a lot of things. And so sketch something. As a matter of fact, when one of my children comes over, I'm going to ask him to bring his sketchbook and sketch one thing. And there was something else I was going to ask him to do with to play one thing on the piano. And there was one other thing I wanted him to do. I'm trying to think of what that was. To bring me back one of the homeschool history books and tell me something that he remembers in there or that he liked about it. So other things to make each day different is that every day one subject that you don't know that you want to read about, or sing a song, one song. Make sure, and that's what these lists are great for, because you can put a little box beside each thing and check it off and make you feel like you've been somewhere that day. So for the ladies at home, how about mend one thing or sew a button on? Mend or sew. Well, the young men can do this too. And also pick one new recipe or analyze the atmosphere of the day and create something new. I suggest it because we've had this windy, blustery weather where trees are cracking and wind is blowing like crazy. The windows are rattling and the whistling is coming through the door, that we should invent a wild, windy tea party with a moody sort of atmosphere. Create a special crazy sandwich that just blew in with all kinds of shredded things on top of it, and then create a tempest in a teapot type of tea, and then create a fashion design that's for the windy, moody day. Or like I used to do, the fog fashions. Well, there's more than one. There are more than 4 seasons, in my opinion. There's so many different weathers going on in each season. So one new recipe, try one new recipe, one piece of music to either listen to or to play. Now, I would suggest people do things rather than watch other people do them. So that is, but you can watch other people do things if it inspires you to do it. And I believe that writing is more active and reading is probably more passive, although I would suggest if you've got books that you have never read, or maybe read a smattering of them, or just something like this that I got out that's from 1996, I decided, well, maybe I would just read everything in it, or read one thing in it per day. And I came across this applesauce fruitcake, and it has only good things in it. And so I decided I was going to go ahead and make that. And it doesn't have sugar in it. It doesn't have anything, like those 100 ingredients on the side of a bread bag. It's only got about 6 ingredients in it. And then I also wanted to do something in here that had to do with painting, because I had seen a couple of watercolors as I went through this, and then I got the idea of a different scent every day, because someone was making dried herbal sachets for the bath and for the house, and I thought that would be interesting to make a scent every day. And sometimes if you some of you coffee lovers might just like to try a different flavor every day, or just make it. I don't drink coffee, but I like to make it sometimes because Mr. S drinks it. But sometimes I like to get it that has a scent in it, like a hazelnut or a chocolate, and just make it. I make it in with the little funnel into 1 cup, because the scent is so pleasant. Or to make something that you like to smell it. Remember, I told you about that strawberry tea someone had sent me, and I made it in a pot, and she said, make it in a pot and it will scent the whole house. And it was very beautiful. Now, for the women at home, just do something. I know we all have our routines. We all have to do some things every day that make one day seem the same as the other, but I think it's important to have something different for Monday, for Tuesday, for Wednesday. So I've listed a bunch of things here for my grandchildren who are working at home, the older ones who are working at home. And now I want to talk about things that you can do at home so to keep it from keep the sameness away. Now, some sameness is very important for our mental stability. But if you have little children at home, they will appreciate the routine. They'll like waking up, knowing what happens next, knowing what's going to happen to them, not being shuffled away all the time to something that they don't know what's going on. Not too much adventure, just enough. and have slightly different things every day. That's why I think it's important to have some instruction books that tell you how to make things, maybe with paper, or how to create, or how to be artistic, because the children will really appreciate it. And even though you might not become really good at art or crafts or anything like that, sometimes one of your children will go further with it. And I know a lot of people are daunted by what you have to teach children, but you really don't, because they take off with it. They develop an interest and go further with it. Since I always like to talk about people, in my third part of I like to talk about, getting dressed and taking care of your appearance. And taking care of your appearance is so important for the home. And this is what I would recommend for the young men who are working at home, my grandsons, my grandchildren. Go get up and put on a clean shirt, taking care of your hair, and there are other things that they could look up that would help to distinguish one day from the next. Like, I always on Monday, I know it's Monday because today's the day I do this. So today's the day I send a card to, or today's the day I look up this. And so then after the appearance, I think, is really, really important, because if you're a young man at home, and at least you could change your shirt, that would mean you have to have 7 shirts so that you have one each day and you know which one is for which day. And then the other thing is to get up every so many minutes and go and do something else, like go outside and take a picture. Go outside and take a picture. See if you can find a bald eagle, or a robin, or a deer, something like that. And of course, I'm rural, and I'm speaking mostly from a rural point of view. And but there might be something in your own backyard. I think it's very important also to go to someone else in the family at home and ask them a question, like, how are you doing, and what are your interests today, and what are you doing today? What is your schedule today? Just go and interview everyone in the family. One of the things I like to do when I'm on the Zoom talks, when I do Thrive classes for my grandchildren, is to ask each one to tell me, from the oldest to the youngest in their family, starting with your parents, what each person is doing right now. And I think that kind of balances out the future for them, so that they know what people are doing in the now and not be concerned or worried about the future. So then, after that, we get into homemaking. That means if you'll clean up after yourself in everything. I know a lot of the times I live alone because Mr. S is doing all the things he needs to do, and then I look at the house and think, how did it get like this? And I've got no one to blame because I was digging around looking for something and left some things out. And but to clean up after yourself takes quite a bit of time. So one of the things we can do to distinguish one day from the next is to write down what we need to clean up and clean that up, and try not to do the same thing all the time. I know that there are also people to deal with, and one of the things that's going around now that we have to really be careful about is fear. And every time you tune in to some kind of media, whether it's, the good things that you like to watch, and the more of the conservative things, and even religious things, they tend to be filled with so much fear. Well, I ran across an interesting scripture. Let me see if I can find it. Where did I write it down? And goodness, Isaiah 8, verse 12. I had not seen this before. Do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. Well, this is interesting. Do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. Very bad for you. The minute you start to fear, start to feel inside your stomach, your chest, your abdomen, your throat, the tension in your back. Start to see how this affects your body and why God does not want us to have a spirit of fear. That is why when all this stuff started about 3 years ago, and they started shutting down our Christmas and saying we couldn't have Thanksgiving with our families, saying we couldn't travel, they don't want us to even breathe, that I was just kind of looking at it philosophically thinking, I wonder where this is going to go, because I knew history and I'd seen them try this before back in I believe it was the early 1900s when they had the so-called Spanish flu that went around that wasn't even Spanish, and how they spread that around and controlled the world through this flu. And so I wanted to remind you, do not fear what they fear, nor be in dread. How important that is. And I told you, one of my children had told me that they had cut off all media, and that they were just living in this land of spiritual and mental bliss for a long time. And then the minute they accidentally heard something, they observed what it did to their body. They could feel their jaw clench. And that was accidental. Well, then they decided to deliberately go look at something, and there was more going on. Their jaw clenched, their throat constricted, and then their chest got tight, and they got a burning pain between their shoulder blades in their back. And so that's why fear and dread are the big weapons of the world to keep us in fear and dread. I have not had a bit of fear or dread about what they say is going on, but some people can't listen to it because, let's see, I can hear things that they say they're going to do. Oh, they're going to cut us off of our food. Oh, they're going to send us to camps. Oh, they're going to come to our door and take our children away. Oh, they're going to do so much, and they're going to cut off our electricity. And the prices are going to go up so high that we can't afford gas for our cars. We're all going to be living in our cars. I can hear all that. It won't bother me a bit because I've heard it all before. And I have seen God's care over us, because those of you who have read my book, Just Breathing the Air, about my childhood in Alaska and how our parents went in the 1940s and settled the wilderness, and how they lived and kept us safe. We children, all 7 of us, were never subjected to such fear that the world subjects children and grown-ups to today. We never had a fear. And we didn't even know we were living in hard times. That's how much our parents protected us from the worry or the fear. And I believe that they themselves did not have that level of fear. And so the more dread and the more fear you have, ladies at home, the more susceptible you are to the disease and the sickness that they say is going around. And there's also a scripture warning us about fear, and it's from Job, I believe it is. And it was, preachers often use this scripture to show that if you get upset, if you get worried about the future too much, eventually you'll start working your way into doing that or making it happen, the thing that you feared. Now, I'm not sure how this works, but it was Job. He said, "Behold, what I feared the most has come upon me." And so these preachers were always warning us about fear, because if you fear this and you fear that, pretty soon it's going to happen if you keep pursuing that fear. So, and it's very hard, I know, to get rid of fear and dread, because it's like an adrenaline that just keeps reproducing itself in your mind, and pretty soon it manifests itself in your health. And so the more you fear it, and if you fear all this disease they say is going around, more likely susceptible to it, and you probably get so mentally exhausted you'll end up in bed and get a bad cold just because you've neglected yourself. And when you fear, you don't digest as well, you don't tend to eat the right food, you reach for the most quick, comforting food that gives you the biggest high the quickest it can. And so fear can motivate a lot of other very harmful things. And the homemaker at home has got to create an atmosphere without fear. And if you want to pursue that piece, I don't know of any current homemaking books that are out that might help, but going back to the old ones, you can find older ones, and the ones that I found the most comfort from back in the 1980s, and there was always wars and rumors, there were always wars and rumors of wars going on then, and I found that Emily Barnes' books, she had the spirit of homemaking, and well, I forget what it was called, Spirit of Loveliness, and she had several other books, and she teamed up with other people and wrote books about the home and about making it a nice place. And she even had seminars. I don't know if you can get any of those anymore. They were on the big VHS tapes. And so I found a lot of interesting ideas from her. And there were other women of her time that wrote about homemaking and how to make the home beautiful. And so for the home, I think it's important in being a good steward. Now, I talked about being a good steward, taking care of what you have and what you've been given. That part of being a good steward is to keep that fear out and don't be upset. And if you do have fear, one of the tactics of women of the past to get rid of the fear was to do things like wash their hair, change their clothes, go on a walk, read a story, write a letter, and take a bath, put perfume on, make a new recipe, cook a nice meal, set the table, sweep the floor, invite someone over, and there were just many different tactics that they used to get rid of a dread or a fearful feeling. But now it seems like that these things cling to people more, and they find it hard to get rid of. So one of the things that I decided to do many years ago was to go back to this nice, quiet, fearless little world. And of course, you'll get the intimidators. You'll get the people that will tell you you're just living in a dream world. When are you going to wake up and smell the coffee? And someone did come and tell me that way back in the 80s, you're just living in a dream world, because they came out to see me, saw this pleasant little life we were living out on a country ranch, and how I had fixed up this little old ranch house from the 1930s, and would make a rude remark like, you're just living in a dream world, because I didn't have the same level of intensity and fear that they did. Not just fear, but they were caught up in a world of going to work, trying to make ends meet, spending money, trying to save money, constantly keeping up with the pressures that going to work had created, or they had maybe bought something they had to pay for, and they resented it that other people like me didn't have those pressures. And so they would come out and visit for a while and then say, you're just living in a dream world. And because we weren't facing reality, And the quiet little dream world was things like making your own apron, making your own clothes, baking something that was special, or preparing food if you didn't bake, growing some of your own food in a little pot or a little garden, and taking a stroll with your children, singing together, reading aloud, or going to church. Just all these little things, and you could list them for yourself, things you need to do for this calmness, for this quiet little life. When I was growing up, we could do things like go and sit somewhere on a mossy place and throw rocks in a little pond, just real quiet things that are good for you. And we didn't realize, I think, when we were growing up, how that would stabilize us and prepare us for dealing with the pressures of life that should they come upon us. But you can go back and do all those things. Just list all those things that you want to do. And if you don't have children, do them anyway. And I know you've all seen that I float my little boats. I try to make a paper boat and try to float it after a storm has come and there's a puddle out there in the front. I'll go make a little paper boat and float it in there on purpose, because it lightens everything and it makes a happy, carefree existence like you would want for children. And you can get too practical and start to think about all these things. So these things that I have listed that you could do one a day, so that every day is distinct. On Monday you do this, on Tuesday you do that. You can list them for yourself on what works best for you. That's why I don't say Monday is baking or chopping up your vegetables. Tuesday is for washing and Wednesday's for shopping, because it depends on what works best for you. And so there are people that will do one good turn a week for someone in the family. They'll say, today is Thursday, I'm going to do something for someone, and that way they know that it's Thursday. And this is where these little diaries come in so handy. So it's even more important now to do happy things at home and create good memories, just like I created my train ride, or I created my inn, or I created my restaurant, or created something to do that would help other people get a break from the worry of the world. Now, last time I spoke to you, I mentioned this Book of Looks by Lorraine Johnson. And now I remember why I bought it. I was looking through it, and I had read to you about the shepherdess look. You know, this is about clothing and textiles and matching up your skirt with your blouse. And this was called the shepherdess. Remember, I had spoken to you about it several times before. This is coming apart. But I got it because I wanted the girls to know, and I did teach girls when I had little classes, and I wanted them to know. Now I realize what it was. It showed how things were put together according to the style and the era. And so, like, you wouldn't, to keep me from mixing up things, like you wouldn't put a conductor's hat with a peasant dress, and you wouldn't wear a plaid scarf with something else, that didn't go with that era or the design of the style. So that's why I did that, so that we wouldn't end up, because we were in the 1980s when this was written. We were in an era where there was so many choices. There were so many choices, and there was so much to choose from, that girls could get a dip of this and a dab of that, and even boys in clothing and look rather ridiculous and not feel the way clothing is supposed to make you feel. For example, I'll just show you one, and this is called the cowgirl. Well, everything that this describes everything that you would have if you wanted to wear clothing that was Western cowboy, cowgirl type of stuff. And it mentions, the denim skirt with the ruffle, and the shirt with the yoke on it, and the kind of hat to wear, and how that would look good, the kind of hairstyle. And so this is like, for instance, the look. There are really two cowgirl looks. The authentic version consists of blue denim, warm long sleeve shirts, and the sensible boot with the 2 or 3 inch heel that is designed to stay in the stirrup. But with the advent of the modern cowgirl, has gone slick. Country and western singers and their fans wear jeans lavishly embroidered with rhinestones, etc. Everyone's wardrobe should have denim, but since the basic design is such a perfect example of functional form, there's no reason why you can't have several types of denim jeans and skirts with, different embroideries and embellishments on them. Home on the range requires several specific accessories: cowboy boots, tall or small, plain cowhide or beautifully appliqued, or silver decorated belt, maybe with some turquoise in it, etc. So that was one of the reasons. And like they were the author of the denim jacket. We all had a denim jacket that we really enjoyed, and then the little printed bandana, so we knew what to wear with, so that we didn't come across looking rather eccentric. And I guess there's nothing wrong with that if you find that adventurous. But then so now as I was going through it, I realized why I had bought it was so that I would, because I sewed a lot, I like textiles, I like fabrics, and it was just coming into all different kinds of things you could get. You could get patterns for different eras, for different times of like the 1980s or the 1880s. So this one was called the Fair Islander, and it was all about the Fair Isle sweater and how it was made. It's a pullover, cardigan, or vest with decorative pattern and wonderful mix of colors. And it says use it as a focus to build up other color schemes in skirts and blouses. Avoid too many other patterns. Opt instead for plain but textured fabrics. Now, this was important because the younger girls at home, when they were growing up, did not know what the Fair Island sweater was, and we found out more about it in the Victoria magazines when they came out, would sometimes feature some of the clothing of that era, of that place. And then I marked another one, and this was something that was quite coming up in the reenactments of the 1980s. There were things you could go to where you could attend a reenactment of the pioneer era, and they would have a meal, and everyone would be dressed in costumes, and they would have singing, and they would have things that went on during that era, songs of the era, and games of the era, and food of the era. And so we were really interested in learning how to dress for these events. Well, this one was called the Gibson Girl, and there were many patterns for these kind of clothes and dresses at that time in the 1980s, and I still have some of them. And my daughter made some of them and even made some for me, but we wanted to try it. We wanted to try them all and then be careful. We wanted to put the accessories with the right look. And this one was called The Lady, and it always gave a background as to where this look came from, and it would tell what year. Like, for instance, the Gibson Girl, the year was 1900 to 1910. The Gibson Girl gets her name from the captivating drawings of Charles Dana Gibson, an American illustrator. Well, so then we went somewhere to find books about this. This is before the internet. And so when we read that, we went to go look for books that had prints of his drawings to just get more of an idea of what it was. And it's not that much different than the Victorian era, except that it was simpler, and the accessories were a little bit different. Then I think I'd lost the bookmark, but I really enjoyed this one, and it was called The Scotswoman, and it was all about the clothing, the wool clothing, and also had a lot of accessories in it, and we found that quite interesting. And my daughter learned how to make one of these tams, these hats, and also learned how to crochet them. So I was very excited about that. And as it goes through, there were some that were called The Traveler, and some of them not so good, but gave you the idea, made you understand that if you wore these things, you probably wouldn't be. It probably wouldn't be in good taste. So there were some things that were not in good taste at all. And this one was called The Young Romantic, and gave a date of where these ideas came from. And you learn to identify the different looks. Then you could see where it might not be appropriate to wear a jacket with a certain type of skirt that just didn't go well with it. When you learned the era that something was in, now that might not be important to anyone, but that's just was something that I was interested in, that I thought I would share with you. And today I'm going to read to you out of The Jane Austen Diet by Brian Kozlowski. I know I've lost a couple of friends who were listening to this, because some of the things I read that he wrote, they didn't agree with, and now I have 18 listeners instead of 20. So, but he was only trying to say this is how they lived, and like, for instance, he will describe something that they did that we don't do today and maybe wouldn't want to, but I'm just trying to bring out some of the habits of the era. So, now the Jane Austen era, I believe, was probably 1789 to 1835 or something like that. I don't quite know the dates. I know a lot of people resist learning dates, and in homeschool we did not insist people memorize dates, but we automatically learned them, because if we got interested in someone from that era, we'd know what era they lived in and what the automobile of the time looked like, or when the sewing machine was invented. This is important. This was important to us. And we also knew when a certain type of cloth was created, and we knew the era that it came from. So I'm going to read about air today, and it's called We Are So Remarkably Airy. Now, I'm talking about the Jane Austen books, Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Northanger Abbey, what was the other one? Mansfield Park. I might have missed some. I think there were 7 of them, and one of them was never finished. It was called Sanditon, about an ocean resort for people's health that was never finished, and I understand it was finished by somebody, but not done the way I wanted it done. And so you know what? These are copyright free. All the Jane Austen books are copyright free. You could write your own ending to Sanditon, and that's something you can do. That I've told you, another project for one of you can write a better ending to. I need to call my daughter today and tell her to rewrite that and write the right ending and then publish it. You can do that. There's no law against it. And so this was about, a lot of you had seen the 1990s films. I didn't care for the movies that were recreated afterwards in the 2000s of Pride and Prejudice and some of these others. They were just not worth watching, and I particularly didn't like the one in the 2000s of Pride and Prejudice, because it made the Bennet family look so they just looked like they had dirty clothes on, and their blankets and their bedding was just looked torn and dirty. I didn't see that family as that in reading the original books. They made them look rather uncouth and outrageous. I didn't really see it that way, but you can do your own interpretation of it. So we are so remarkably airy. The heady delights of fresh air. Now, of course, I have to stand on the observation deck, because we are having one of those blustery, windy, moody days, and I really don't want to go out in there and get soaking wet. And it's quite cold. So, but I do believe that we need more fresh air than we are getting, and that the Austenites spent more time outdoors than we do, and not so much cooped up indoors. In the olden days, even I remember back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, people had screened-in porches built onto their houses, so that when they sat outside, there was screens around, so that you wouldn't have the insects coming in, or you are more protected. So, the heady delights of fresh air was Austen's most shamelessly convenient plot device. It's easier to count the number of heroines who don't bump into men after popping outside for the innocent enjoyment of air. Yes, they're always running. And even in Wives and Daughters, there's Molly going for a walk and then somebody riding by on a horse that stops and talks to her. So fresh air in Jane Austen's novels is pretty neat stuff in its own right. You might even call it Austen World's recreational drug of choice. Now, wouldn't that be nice if you could exchange adrenaline and worry and fear and dread for fresh air? Have you ever thought of maybe substituting that? Of course, at first you'd be outside 80 times a day getting fresh air, or just how about breathing? But I know you all feel really ridiculous because I've often said substitute a prayer for every little feeling of dread and discomfort and lack of feeling of well-being, and just this nervous sort of anticipation. If you substituted prayer, I've mentioned it to several people who said, well, I'd be on my knees 40 times a day. Well, see, that's good, because after a while, you will last longer between these spasms of dread and fear, and you won't be on the floor, you won't be on your knees 40 times a day or 80 times a day, because you'll realize that God is in control, and it also, your health will improve. So, purely breathing fresh air is enough to put a rosy glow, a happy smile, and a spring in the step of her characters. Outdoor air and physical ecstasies being one and the same. Try that, ladies. Just step outside. That's why our kitchens used to have a kitchen door right outside the kitchen. Of course, it was so that, kitchens get rather heated and you can open the door and step outside. And that's what we need, to be able to step outside. Unfortunately, the way houses are designed, many of the kitchen door just goes straight into the garage. And we need to have somebody come and cut a door from our kitchen straight into the outdoors, and a special place to step down into. We are so very airy, brags Isabella Knightley in Emma. Air even winds up on the pharmaceutical prescriptions. Jane Fairfax only enters the neighborhood of Highbury under the strict orders from an offstage doctor, prescribing she dose up on more country air for the recovery of her health. Wouldn't that be nice to have doctors that would do that, and they could write it on a piece of paper, a prescription, and if you felt like you wanted to pay them for writing that down, you could, but it wouldn't go through a pharmacy. Of course, what they're going to try to do is sell us air. There's this guy on YouTube that he's in Russia, and he gets gifts from people in the U.S. or Australia or Africa or anywhere, and it'll be packed with these little packets of air. And he takes this great big Cossack-looking knife and he bursts the air packet, and then he breathes it because he thinks he's, breathing Florida air, or he's breathing Johannesburg air, or he's breathing Sydney air. And I was just thinking about that as I was reading through this, that these physicians had recommended to Emma to have a daily dose of fresh air. The strict orders from a doctor prescribing she dose up on more country air for the recovery of her health. How wonderful. So when you see people walking along the cliffs overlooking us, the seaside, they would be doing that for health reasons. But also I think it's very good for your mental health to go for a stroll. And even if all you do is go as far as your car and back into your house, Do it anyway. Do it on purpose and write it down on that list. What did I do with the piece of paper I had all that stuff written on? Already lost it. Do it on that list to make each day different. Like Monday, do this. Tuesday, like the dish towels that had the thing to do the baking and the washing. And make yourself a list for every day of the week so that every day will be different. This is one of the things that women at home have known from time long ago, just before even we existed. Always knew, even the pioneer women had to keep track of these things, and always knew that on one day you would do one thing and another day you would do another. To keep track of the days, to keep it the sameness from going from making life dull. We always knew we had to have variety. What are these people covering? He says she was prescribed. Jane Fairfax only enters the neighborhood of Highbury under the strict orders from an offstage doctor prescribing she dose up on more country air for the recovery of her health. What are these people puffing? Incidentally, the same fresh air we should all be puffing more on. Think back to the last time you turned off the air conditioning and opened all the windows in your house, or the last time you drove down a country road with the windows rolled down, letting the breeze fly freely in your face. Chances are you felt a weird and wonderful sense of physical well-being, stretching your arm out the window in response, riding your fingers up and down the fleeting wind, the human equivalent of a dog dangling its tongue out the car window. It's a universal instinct. Back in the 1940s, the British government knew there was something inherently healthy in fresh air, advising housewives during World War II to step outside for frequent air baths whenever they could. Mothers in modern Scandinavia are likewise famous for their staunch belief in the curative benefits of fresh air. So, long before we sealed off our homes from the outside world, Austen knew that indoor and outdoor air were two different things. Inside air could go stale or foul, as Austen sensed it. Regency homes had their own air quality issues. Soot and smoke from fireplaces meant the air not only smelled differently inside, it made people feel differently too. Austen's characters often complained of a mysterious dullness whenever they're cooped up indoors for too long. In Pride and Prejudice, Jane Bennet does not look well after a prolonged period inside. Staying indoors is likewise the worst punishment Mr. Bennet can inflict on poor Kitty. You are never to stir out of doors till you can prove you have spent 10 minutes of every day in a rational manner. Well, that might be something you want to add to your list of things to do on particular days. 10 minutes of every day thinking something rational, that might be worthwhile. How horrid it all is, cries Charlotte Palmer in Sense and Sensibility, going stir-crazy when only one day of rain keeps her shut up indoors. Such weather makes everything and everybody disgusting. I remember back in the olden days when my children were younger, it rained terribly, but we had a porch, and so I would get them a snack of dried fruit, nuts, cut up vegetables, and give them each a little dish, and they'd take it out on the front porch and watch the rain and eat this snack. And I don't know why I did that. I just thought it would be interesting, and I thought they might like to go out and actually hear it and see it and experience it without getting wet from it. And so, ladies, I hope that this has been... Oh, there are my notes. Let me just look this over and make sure that I have said everything that will remind you of how important home life is. And one of the things that will happen, especially in this war, is that you will sense that you don't have an approval rating, a very high approval rating for what you've done. And that's why you have to keep this little list and perhaps a journal, start a journal, and make a record of what you're doing. Remember, yes, last time that I spoke about this woman who started a journal so she could just get her bearings, and so that she could keep her course, and so that she could kind of make a record of where she was going and where she was at and what she had done. And so that way you don't have to have approval ratings of your peers or of the world out there. Another great thing about being confined more to the home is you get to think about, talk about, and do what you want without worrying about pleasing other people. And you only try to make life better at home for your own family. So today, try to sing a song, read one chapter of a book if possible, read it aloud, and paint a little picture, write a letter to someone, sweep if you can, clean out one thing, and just make a list of little things to make one thing, and mend one thing. Create a beautiful meal. We have a new cookbook, which I will talk to you about the next time I come, and I was so pleasantly surprised. The food was absolutely delicious. And so I have a lot more to talk about, but I'm going to quit for now and let you get on with your day. So till I see you again, stay close to Christ, stay close to your home, and focus on your family. We'll talk to you later. Bye.